Guys, welcome back. It's your buddy Isaac. So, I kind of wanted to talk about something that's interesting and, quite frankly, a truth that kind of got reflected in a conversation I've had recently with another friend of mine, and that is that you and I have been lied to about home ownership. We've been lied to about whether it's an asset or valuable of any kind, and here's the reason why here in a minute. So, what brought this conversation on was literally that there are some states of late that are going out and saying to major companies like BlackRock and other businesses that they're going to put out a bill that prohibits banks and corporations from buying single family homes. The idea here is to prevent these businesses from purchasing the buildings for the sake of rental so that they can try and make single family housing more affordable, more available to the regular people. I think it's brilliant. I think it's cool. But on the other hand, I also have to come back and realize that we've been kind of lied to as a matter of just public common wisdom, essentially. The idea of purchasing a home as being the footstool to creating wealth or expanding your wealth is kind of, well, wrong. Look, I understand the whole idea is that you buy a house and the collateral from the house allows you to borrow more money from banks and credit cards and the like. But that's not really increasing your wealth. That's increasing your credit, which increases the amount of debt you owe, which then increases the expenses that you pay. It's not increasing your wealth, that's increasing your poverty. You're making yourself more poor by doing that. Because the thing about loans and the variety of stuff that people look at when they go to buy a home is they forget that eventually you do have to pay that back. All the money, all the credit that you borrow, you eventually have to return to the creditor with interest. So by the time that you bought your house, not only will you have paid them back in 30 years, but you'll have paid them what you paid for the house and more. On top of that, any financial advisor worth their salt is going to tell you that it's genuinely a bad idea. And the reason behind that is, quite frankly, no investor, no asset is something that you want to spend over $100,000+ and then hope that in 30 years it's going to be worth something. See, the banks like to talk to you about stuff called equity, the idea that the longer you own the home, the more valuable it technically becomes. But the problem is the housing market doesn't care about equity. The house that boomers bought about in the early 2000s that was worth $90,000 is now $250,000 because of the market today. But if that bubble bursts because suddenly they live in a state that has banned and outlawed banks and corporations from buying single-family homes, which in the last decade have been the predominant purchasers of single-family homes in order to rent them out to other people, the housing market will burst. It will utterly collapse. That $90,000 house will be back to being worth practically $90,000. And this is going to be on top of even worse if they happen to refinance the home. Because when you refinance a home, what you're basically doing is you're redoing the mortgage. You're paying off the old mortgage and then taking the extra money as an additional loan. Now, a lot of people usually do this to fix a roof or fix the foundation or fix the pipes, what name you. Which, by the way, is another reason why owning a home isn't really an asset. Because the entire time you own that house, that property, you are responsible for the maintenance of it. If the roof falls apart due to old age, you have to pay for it out of pocket. Insurance covers things like tornadoes, hurricanes, weather, but if it's just old and it's falling apart, you got to pay for that out of your own pocket. Kind of the same deal with if your engine blows up in your car. Your car insurance will protect you if you get into a wreck. It'll protect you for a number of things, but wear and tear is not covered. So that's another major topic that just doesn't get discussed when you're talking about home ownership. Maintenance. Repairing your roof alone every 10 years can cost you up to $10,000, $20,000. And keep in mind, you're going to be doing that at least through the entirety of a mortgage, which is normally about 30 years, about 3 times. So you're going to be spending at least 60 grand potentially in maintenance just in the roof. That's not talking the HVAC system. That's not talking the plumbing, which will also cost around $15,000 to $20,000. Owning a house don't sound so cheap anymore, does it? The fact of the matter is, owning a home isn't really a good asset at all. The entire time, if you're owning a home simply to live in it, it's nothing but a drain on your finances. You're going to be spending money like it's nobody's business, whether it's the mortgage, the insurance, the property tax, maintenance costs that you have to spend enormous amounts of cash for. Now, it does technically come some caveats. Obviously, the bank can't necessarily kick you out for whatever arbitrary reason. They can't choose to just not renew the mortgage the next year like they can when you're leasing from somebody or renting from someone. But at the same time, renting from someone, if the pipes blow up, you don't have to spend 20 grand. You call the landlord and say, hey, come fix this crap. If the roof falls apart, you call the landlord. And if they don't do that, you call code enforcement, who then basically pull an Uncle Sam on their butts and tell them you fix this or they're not paying you a dime. At the end of the day, owning a home isn't really a source of wealth. It's a source of just bankruptcy, essentially. So unless you're actually capable of paying month, year after year for this building, you're better off just renting somewhere. Now, if you want to actually build wealth and build an actual stable economic section, there are ways you can do that. One of the things that people get scared away from the most, which is the stock market, is actually one of the best places where you can build wealth. Your average share in a company that's not Disney is basically the price of a Big Mac. You can buy shares in Ford for $11.56 a share right now. Hell, I've got the Robinhood app. Now, I'm actually kind of savvy, so I kind of know what I'm doing here. I know what the companies do. I do my research kind of thing. And I definitely would recommend, if you are going to look into this, to, get yourself a broker. Get somebody that you trust, that you can talk to, somebody that you can go and get a coffee with every so often, somebody that you can actually see face to face and talk with on a regular basis. It's like, I've already got a few shares in Nokia here, which is about $3.82 a share. I have shares in American Beverage, which is $2.68 a share. And because they both pay dividends, I actually get paid to own these shares. I don't have maintenance costs. I don't have to sit there and spend as much in taxes per se as I would owning a home. And the only time I technically really have to pay taxes, if I'm correct, is if I actually sell them. And here's the kicker. With shares, just like owning a home, because they are a legitimate asset that you own, you can build credit owning shares in the stock market too. And it's cheaper. You get paid to own them. The only time doing the stock market becomes gambling is literally the same time that it becomes gambling when it goes down being a homeowner. If you buy a home for $90,000 and you're hoping that it might go up in value, you really are gambling. You're basically hoping and betting that in 30 years that home isn't going to fall apart on you. or that zoning laws aren't going to change, or that various state laws won't change, or any number of things won't happen. 30 years is a very long time. And I hate to tell you this, but a lot can happen in 30 years. We've seen that since the 90s. So really trusting a huge chunk of money, of wealth that, quite frankly, you don't personally have, on an investment that ultimately you have no idea is going to actually pan out or not, is, generally speaking, according to pretty much the mass majority of financial advisors, a bad idea. Most financial advisors will tell you that you should want to try and diversify your investments, to have little sprinklings everywhere you can, not lump every penny that you've got into a couple handful of assets that you may or may not make anything out of. Which is exactly going to happen to these families that, like I said, who probably at this point, if you live in places like Minnesota, which is a major one that is actually fixing to make this kind of law, or is trying to push this sort of bill, your house that you bought that you thought was now $500,000 or $500,000 is going to go right back to being a little more than $100,000. Now, personally, I think that's a good thing. I think the overinflation of a market that's being held aloft by non-market forces, and yes, I do consider bank and major corporations buying single-family homes to be a non-market force, because what the hell are they buying these things for? I can understand a corporation or a bank owning things like a apartment complex or condominium, but a single-family house? Yeah, no, leave that to the single families. Besides which, it's kind of ridiculous that they do that. But this is kind of my thought process. I'm sure that a lot of people are probably screaming at me right now, like, you're wrong, you're horrible, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, look, I'm, however, looking at it from a mathematic perspective. Again, remember, like I said, these people will probably have refinanced their home and now will have to pay back $500,000 on a property that they spent $90,000 on. And consider this, a lot of these properties now that are $250,000 to $500,000 are little more than 3.5 bedrooms and a 2-bath house sitting on half an acre of crabgrass. Not a whole lot of value there. So when these markets do burst, yeah, they're gonna crater. And again, it's math as well. The only direction your money seems to go when you own a house to live in is out of your pocket. The idea of an asset is for money to go into your pocket. The whole point of an asset literally is that you are paid for owning it. And a single family home is really only an asset if you're buying some dilapidated, falling apart building, fixing it up, and then flipping it for a higher price. Or you're renting it to someone else, or you're putting it out on Airbnb. But even then, keep in mind, you're probably going to have to charge an enormous amount of money just for that alone. A single family house rent is probably going to have to be at least $2.5 grand just to be able to cover costs. Whereas Airbnb is pretty much the same story, really, hoping that every single month, not to mention that you have to deal with the costs of tenants tearing things apart and ripping stuff up. So unless you actually are charging enough to actually cover all of that, owning a home really isn't that big of an investment. It's more of a shiny doodad to purchase when you actually have some major financial success. It's really recognizing homeownership for what it genuinely is. Not this great, amazing thing of awesome, but an expense. Kind of like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. there are plenty of other options vehicle-wise that do pretty much the same thing, but will cost you nowhere near as much in maintenance or any other variety of expenses. So I hope you guys enjoyed this rant. I know some of you are probably already cursing my name at this point, telling me I'm a crazy idiot, but I hope you did enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next video.